Oh, hello, it's Rebecca. How are you doing today? In today's video, we are going to be talking about lipedema, and I got a whole presentation. I went down the rabbit hole, all the things, and I'm calling this presentation the Battle of the Thigh Fat. Well, because I really want to infuse a little bit of humor into it, but I also want to get into the weeds a little bit about lipedema, a lot of it because it's really complex. A lot of women don't actually know that they have it, and I didn't know that I had it for years, and it's turned out that it probably started for me when I was in puberty, like who knew? And I just want to talk about all of the ins and outs. We're going to look at it from so many different angles. We're going to talk about my personal experience, some treatments. Well, I shouldn't say treatments. Let's just say some things that I've tried, some things that I've read that other women have tried that have been, well, rather efficacious. And I'll be sharing those with you at some point. I will probably divide this up into a few sections because it is a rather lengthy presentation. And the more I got into it, the more I went, ooh, that's interesting. That might be a must know. And so I would encourage you to stay with me all the way to the end and see what things you can implement, see what next steps could be for you. And here's to having lots of fun, diving in, and lots of hope and a new excursion on our journey to reach a healthy body. All right, let's get into it. All right, so as I mentioned before, I have called this presentation the Battle of the Thigh Fat, and it's really about my lipedema journey, but the title, the Battle of the Thigh Fat, is really about how I felt about my entire weight loss journey until recently. I have done a lot of mindset work, a lot of internal work, really trying to understand the ins and outs of everything, of every piece to the weight loss journey that I can imagine. And one thing that I could not figure out was why were my thighs a different size than my upper body. I just couldn't understand it. And I'll get into how I figured out that it was actually lipedema. I want to say that I hope that you find this presentation interesting. I hope that if you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh my God, her legs look like mine, then that's kind of sort of where I started. And so you might end up thinking, well, what can I glean from this? What can I apply? What can I try? What does she know that I don't know? Because there's a lot of things that a lot of people know that I don't know. And I have lots of questions, and people know lots of things that I want to know. And so this is kind of like a culmination of things that I've learned about lipedema. It's really, really complex. And so the way for me to probably actually wrap my head around it was to actually dig in deep and come up with something that was a presentation form and share it with you. So I hope that you find it useful, and I hope that you find that even if, it's not for you, that you might have a family member, you might have a friend that's like, oh my goodness, I've heard the term, or I've not heard the term, but I see maybe what it looks like. Even if you get halfway through this and you're thinking this could be what you have, go check out this presentation or look up these resources, because that would be amazing for that person to find that there are some answers to why their body is the way that it is. And this doesn't have all of the answers. I totally went down the rabbit hole from all of the angles, but I just wanted to let you know that right out of the gate that there is some hope, there is some relief, and hopefully you'll find a lot of value in this presentation. I'm just going to do a little disclaimer before we get started because, well, it might be necessary. I just want to say that this is really for informational purposes only. There is no intention on my part to diagnose or treat something that you may or may not have. My discussion is based on personal experience. It's research and evidence-based. I did do a lot of research. It took me a lot of time to put this together. I will also share my personal hypothesis that's based on research and my personal experience, and reading tons and tons of information and experiences from also other women. And the point of this is for you to get curious. I want you to be empowered about your body. I want you to learn about your body and understand that, if you're struggling with weight loss, physiology is complicated. And then, as you're going to see, we throw in something like lipedema into the mix with all of its caveats. Then you're going to think, wow, okay, so I might be blessed to be female, but wow, are there some caveats that come with it? So I want you to do your due diligence, though, and I want you to research and follow up on not just everything that I mentioned here, but anything that you read anywhere, whether it's a study, whether it's something that you read in a forum, an experience. Don't just discount it because you're like, that just sounds weird. Well, it could be, but I've also sort of learned that weird, maybe it's not so weird. It could be something that could be looked into further. Maybe there was a study that, didn't get peer reviewed and published, and you think, well, maybe it has some answers that I could apply. Look into it. In other words, leave no stone unturned. And that's where we're going to go here in this presentation. There is a lot of hope that I want to impart to you, so I want you to keep digging. One quick note, I sort of already mentioned this. I do really get into the weeds with this, and you're going to see. And I hope that some of it, a lot of it that you find is just as exciting and fascinating as I do. I don't, assume for like a second that you're going to find everything like, oh my God, okay, really? I'm not that fascinated by it. But it just shows the complexity of physiology and pathophysiology and how the body works specifically for women. And that's kind of why I go in the direction that I go, because I am looking at it at all angles. I do talk about how lipedema affected me in my weight loss goals. I also share some visuals. I could say that maybe I didn't really want to share them because I was digging up some photos. It took me back to a place of remembering maybe how I felt in those moments about myself, about my body. And that was probably the most triggering for me, was just remembering how she felt, how I felt, how other women might feel. And that's part of one of the reasons why I actually want to share this, because I want to confer hope. I want to let you know that women are finding some relief. And so not all is lost, but I just want to let you know that in advance I will be sharing that. I'm also going to share what I tried in the past, share what I'm using now. I'll discuss my many hypotheses based on everything that I've researched and that I've been able to or not able to corroborate anywhere else. And I'll also talk about where I am in my journey today and a little thigh update. I'm going to call it a thigh update a little bit later on in the presentation. So, the battle of the thigh fat. Yes, let's dive in. My preliminary assessment and my thoughts are these. The thigh fat always seemed to hang on. It just seemed impossible to lose even after losing 93 pounds. And I think that it likely began in puberty around age 11. I always had large, round thighs. Whether it was, you saw it as a gift or not, they were always there. When I was 15, I wore probably a size 16 skirt. But based on my past research, my shape was due to, it wasn't just curves, it was estrogen dominance. And the lipedema seemed relatively controlled until I reached about my 40s and my mid 40s, my late 40s, I would probably say. And then that's when I was hitting perimenopause and then moving into menopause. And I don't talk about a lot of that in the presentation, but things do change. They can show up. They're like either drastically change for women, or maybe it's the first time things start changing for women. But that can be a critical age for a lot of women, and it was for me. My lower body was always disproportionately larger compared to my upper body, and my clothing size was always different for my upper body versus lower body. Ladies, you know how you could go into the stores, and back in the day when I worked in corporate, I always wanted the suit. wanted a nice suit, either with the jacket and the pants or the skirt. And I always found that I never could buy those because the top was one size and the bottom I had to buy, a completely different size. So everything I kind of had to pair together. So if I wanted that particular set, what was I supposed to do? Buy two and then use the top from one and the bottom from another one? Anyway, I digress, but I mean, it is a real thing for a lot of us. And it's, as you'll see in this presentation, this isn't just about being overweight. This is a real thing. Let's dive deep. So let's talk about the things that I tried to target the fat loss and the thighs. Now, this was actually after doing a lot of research and reading a lot of books by one of my favorite researchers, Liam McDonald. Why? Because he digs deep into the research and he understands fat loss. And he's not just one that studies it like in a vacuum. Like, I appreciate the work of so many different people, but when you work with actual people and you say, okay, in real life, that might not apply. He is that person. He is that person that has been in the trenches with women and their weight loss journeys, and he is masterful with understanding how women lose weight, or maybe they don't. And so we'll get into that. So some of the things that I tried were creams. I read about aminophylline in one of his books, and so I thought, oh, well, let's try that. So I couldn't buy aminophylline without, it's extremely expensive if you get it from a compounding pharmacy. And so I found it on Amazon in a product called Amylene. I tried those. I tried other kinds of shredding gels. I tried lower body exercises, resistance training, very effective, by the way, sweatpants, hot creams to increase the blood flow and target areas prior to exercise, supplements like yohimbine to target the receptors in the thighs, all based on this research. And it seemed like the more weight that I lost, the more disproportionate I seemed to be. My upper body after losing 93 pounds was, sort of like a size medium. My lower body would be like a size 12 or 14. And then currently, as I've continued on my journey and I've lost more than 100 pounds, my upper body is, maybe a size medium to small, depending on the top. I'm not hung up on size, but I'm just using it as an illustration to say the upper body is significantly smaller than the lower body. The lower body might be a size 8 or a 10. I don't really know, but I know that it's right around there. And minimal changes, it seems, happens in the lower body, and it can totally mess with your mindset, your confidence. And I will tell you, for me personally, I hated my thighs. My thighs felt very heavy, very heavy. There were times that I could feel even just playing racquetball. I felt like I would have like 25-pound weights on each thigh. You could literally feel the weight in the thigh. And so with every dieting effort, clearly, I started to feel more desperate with each dieting effort because it's no fun. You feel like you're doing all the things. Now, there's metabolism and some other things that come into play too, like after you've used calorie deficits for a long period of time, you've got some down regulation, but we're not even talking about that right now. We're just talking about just the thigh piece of it. So just noticing where your weight is being distributed or redistributed. Ladies, are you still with me? All right. How I discovered lipedema was I was actually doing some research on semaglutide, and I was watching one of my favorite naturopathic physicians, and she was talking about a lot of the research that she was doing, that it's not all about appetite control. She was talking about the lights coming on, for her, and it combating inflammation, and I thought, I'm going to have to research that. And this is one thing, let me just stop right there, because this is one thing I always want to encourage you to do. Anytime you hear a term and you're thinking, could that be true? Start doing some research on it. Don't dismiss it. It's okay to go down the rabbit hole and see, and you might uncover something about yourself. But when I was doing my research and I was hearing about all of the muscle loss and all of these crazy things that are, turns out not really even attributed to semaglutide, I ran up on a video of a gal that was in the gym, and someone was talking about semaglutide, and they said, well, this person has, lipedema, and in spite of how much she works out, the thighs are still, she was a personal trainer, the thighs never really reduced a whole lot. And I started looking at her thighs and I thought, holy cow, my thighs look just like that. Round, for lack of a better characterization, extraordinarily larger than the rest of me. And I thought, what, I need to, lipedema, let me start looking into that. And what I started to find, even though my brain totally twisted into a new level, listening to some of these researchers like Dr. Karen Herbst, was this is really complicated. But then I sort of really understood that from a clinical perspective, why my body was the way that it was. And then I started to really understand from a clinical perspective that I had lipedema in my thighs and in my arms. Now, this was extraordinary for me because it started to change the way that I viewed my body and my entire weight loss journey. I mean, I was already doing a lot of the mindset work, and so that was happening, being careful with the things that I affirm about myself, looking around for all kinds of abundance to kind of offset the mindset and just really do that deeper work that we all forget about. But as I started to dive deeper into it, I thought, okay, now everything makes sense. And to be honest with you, I felt relief. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel anger like, why did this happen to me? And I get why a lot of women feel anger about having lipedema. I read it in the Reddit subforums all the time. People feel despair and they think, why did this happen to me? I don't understand. I'm never going to get rid of this. But from a spiritual perspective, we really have to understand that we always have to be looking out for all of the positives in everything that we're evaluating, and then just keep turning over those stones and looking for new ideas. So feel into the relief if you're getting there, and it's okay to start releasing some of the anger. If anger is the first thing that you feel, I'm not going to make you wrong for feeling that. I'm just saying what I felt was relief, not anger, but I totally understand women who feel completely annoyed and downright angry about it. And it's not like there's not plenty of reasons to feel annoyed. And believe me, we'll get into that a little bit later. All right, what I really want this to do too is be able to illuminate new avenues for research so that together we can learn to control and combat this medical condition that we call lipedema. But we definitely are on the frontiers of research. I don't know how long we've known about it. I don't know if it's just now coming to the forefront of everything. I've read in some accounts that some people actually said, yeah, they've known about that it existed for years. I frankly have never heard of it, and I'm a researcher, so I'm an independent researcher, so I've never heard of it, but that doesn't, I don't know everything, so this is fascinating to me. But have a little compassion for yourself as you go down this journey, and let's have compassion together as we dive deep into the rabbit hole. So what is lipedema? Well, basically, it's a chronic progressive condition where the fat accumulates disproportionately in the legs and oftentimes in the arms, and it is often resistant to diet and exercise. That's kind of the not good news. We'll get to the good news later. But it is affecting women primarily. Sometimes it's in men, but that might have to do with an imbalance of estrogen. I'm not really sure. I haven't really looked into that. But I do know that lipedema is often mistaken for just straight up obesity. Or it could be misunderstood as lymphedema, which is not the same. That's a fluid issue and edema. So not the same thing. Not that they can't coincide, but it's not the same. That's a completely separate condition. So in the lipedema affected areas, there will be pain and tenderness. You could bruise easily. You could have column-like legs. You could have cuffing at the ankles. I don't have these. but there can be cuffing, disproportionate lower body fat relative to the upper body, and potentially debilitating fatigue. And we'll understand a little bit about that, why that occurs later. And you know, this is not even an exhaustive list. This is just some basic signs. Now let's look at this picture that I have here up on my screen. And I want you to observe it with me, not from a place of criticism, not from a place of being mean, but just from an objective point of view of just analysis, so that you can look at it and say, huh, that could be me, or it could be like someone that I actually know. So if you just look here, now it looks like my mouse is not going to show up, but if you just look here on my thighs, on the round portion of my thighs, just below the waistline, you could see the rounder pieces. You could see my thighs look very swollen. You could see that they're, you know, I clearly am overweight. This was in 2014. Clearly I'm overweight. So there is subcutaneous fat that I need to lose here. But you can just look at proportionately how my lower body is larger than my upper body. You could see that I have fat in my arms, have fat in my stomach, fat in my waistline, and a significant amount of fat in my thighs. And you can't see my legs here, but I mean, I can just tell just from like looking and observing, I've seen enough pictures, that the bottom part of my thigh, like in my calves, are really large. Now, how does it affect collagen and fat storage? So we know that lipedema is not just a fat disorder, it is a disorder of connective tissue or collagen. And it's this overproduction of collagen in the fat tissue that causes these thicker collagen layers, which results in hardened and painful fat rather than a soft, pliable, squishy fat. And this fat resists weight loss due to the structural rigidity of the type of fat that it actually is. So here we are seeing that it's not just a stubborn fat. I mean, it is really stubborn, but it's not just that. It's about a structural change in the connective tissue due to this excess collagen production, the rigid environment making it hard and painful. And then also the lymphatic function of the body plays a critical role in all of this, and the lipedema that is the condition. And we know that lymph helps manage the fluid balance and tissue health in the body. And so those things a lot of times will actually coexist. So this can explain why traditional weight loss methods don't actually work for lipedema, because of the way that the connective tissue changes actually in the body. So the characteristics of this lipedema fat, because it involves the excess collagen is transformative in the structure, it can start behaving like visceral fat. The fat that we see most often in men that's really rigid, thick, and it's really hard, and it kind of sort of looks and feels like a basketball, it can start to feel really hard in lipedema fat. And due to this fibrotic collagen that surrounds the fat cells, now we have increased rigidity and reduced flexibility and painful fat. How am I doing with painting the picture so far? Yeah, are we getting there? Okay, so now we have these common issues, which are increased tissue stiffness. The fat tissue is less flexible due to this accumulation of collagen. And so this rigid tissue presses on the nerves and could cause a tremendous amount of pain. We also have impaired blood flow and impaired lymphatic drainage. So what does this lead to? Fluid retention. Then the collagen compressing on the lymph vessels. We have the restricted blood flow, which further increases pain and inflammation. And I just want to say too that Dr. Ben Bikman, I love his channel, and if you've never looked into anything that he talks about, I am so fascinated that he researches the adipose cell and how it responds to insulin resistance, its will to survive. It's just fascinating, and if you want to know more, then just dive into his channel, and he talks a lot about just health in general, but the fat cell and lipedema as well. So back to this. Nerve compression. So let's talk about that for a second. And how does that happen? How do we end up with the pain? The hardened tissue, now we know that it's less flexible, more rigid due to this accumulation of this fibrotic collagen. The hardened tissue traps the nerves and causes chronic pain. So with this nerve compression, now we have pain signals that are more sensitive and can be exaggerated as well. It feels exaggerated. It feels like, why does this feel like on a scale of 1 to 10 that this is like an 11 when it should be a 2? But that's what happens. So the poor circulation combined with the lymphatic congestion also leads to chronic inflammation, and these inflammatory responses further make the nerve endings in the thighs and like even in the tricep area hypersensitive to pain. And then just, here's an example. You could be sitting maybe on a couch or in a chair with your legs up. There are times when I sit on the couch when my husband and I are watching the show The Challenge. I just love watching The Challenge because I love seeing what the human body and what the psyche is capable of doing. And an animal, my animals, a dog, cat, will cross over my leg, and it's like, wow, it almost feels like someone took a stick to my leg. That's amplified pain. Or it was a couple of weeks ago, my husband and I had gone to the grocery store, and he kind of sort of let go of the cart, and the bottom piece of the metal hit me in the back of the leg, like down below, like near my ankle. And what should be like, something that you would barely feel maybe, because it wasn't like he slammed the cart into my leg. It sort of rolled. He could have been more careful, but it sort of rolled into my leg and struck my leg. And it was just like, oh, and he just stood there and looked at me because he couldn't reconcile in his mind how that tap on my leg would cause so much pain. And that's why. It's because the pain is amplified. So you have to keep that in mind too, that the pain and the lipedema, for whether it's injections or even a massage, can be very painful. So now we talk about fat cell dysfunction and death. So if we think about, now we have more rigid cells, so they're less flexible. The fibrotic collagen is now walling off the fat cells. That can lead to preventing this, this normal metabolic function. And then we get a lot of apoptosis, or the cell death. The cell will actually die off. And it apparently is higher in this lipedema affected fat tissue. And this worsens inflammation, because if you think about your body not being able to clear cells that have died, you think, wow, that is an accumulation of debris that will keep your immune system working a lot harder, trying to clear debris out of the system. And so if we think about how this is characterized by all of the things we talked about, the tissue stiffness, poor circulation, nerve compression, chronic pain, chronic inflammation, fatigue, only leading to this pain, swelling, and yes, resistance to fat oxidation. Hormones also will play a key role. We know that there are higher local estrogen levels in the thighs alone, and then they've actually seen it concurrently with lipedema at the same time. So this could be a thing of the chicken or the egg, which one came first? Well, higher estrogen levels might create an environment that lends itself to lipedema. That is probably the case, but I have to do a little bit more research on that and see what is the case there and dive a little bit deeper on that. So what we do know is that the traditional weight loss methods don't seem to work for lipedema. I mean, if you're reducing the thigh, you can reduce, the general subcutaneous fat. And the fibrotic fat is what becomes more resistant because of all the signaling. And it's even more complex than that. But just for the lipedema fat, it's a structural issue and it's a metabolic issue, this is really complicated, right? Are you seeing it? All right. So unfortunately, I didn't know that my mouse cursor wouldn't work as I'm doing this live presentation, but we'll get through it. So I dug up a couple of pictures here, and this was me in 1991, and this was actually after I had lost, I don't know, I threw out my scale then, and so I don't know how much weight I had lost. I knew that I was like exercising 2 hours a day. I had gone on this rampage of totally deciding that, well, food was the enemy and food hated me. And I exercised a lot and I didn't eat a whole lot. And so I created a lot of the cycles of this problem. It became self-perpetuating in a sense. But if we just look at my thighs in this picture of me in 1991, you could tell that already here, you could see the fat storage in the thighs, probably because it's a very highly estrogenic body at this point. I'm really young. I'm also taking the birth control pill. But I do notice, like just in the hips, butt, and thighs, that I am larger on the bottom half than I am on the top half. And that's even like wearing a baggy top. Like I can just see that. Can you see that? Now, if we look at this before picture in 2014, I can see, this is the picture that we looked at before. I could see that the lipedema has worsened like quite a lot. I can tell here that, I have these really large upper thighs that are just really inflamed and significantly worse than the picture on the left. So those are just some visuals. If your legs at all look like mine, then it might be time for you to consider that you might also have lipedema based on all of the key signs that we were talking about, earlier. Something to consider, not something that, you need to diagnose or that I am diagnosing with you, just something to consider.